Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie, broadcasting throughout the world and around the United Kingdom. We are bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. across all our digital platforms, including YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. And for people on TikTok, the best viewing experience is on our YouTube page. So folks, what an evening it is. What a lovely couple of days it's been. Beautiful weather. Absolutely sunny. And I do hope you've been getting out and making the most of the lovely weather, because this is Good Evening Britain. It's not Good Morning Britain. It's not the programme which attempts to scare you and panic you and make you afraid of living, as does much of our mainstream media. No, we are not in the business of scaring you. We're not in the business of frightening you. We're not in the business of trying to make your children afraid of reality, okay? We are the wholesome alternative to Good Morning Britain. We are Good Evening Britain, okay? Where we have got our head screwed on effectively, where we are not climate alarmists, where we love the sun, and especially here in Scotland we love the sun because we only see it, if we're lucky, a few days a year. So when it's out, we're out as well. We're making the most of it. And lovely hot balmy evening as well here in the great British city of Glasgow, where we're broadcasting to the world tonight. Folks, please tell us where you are watching from. Please tell us what's on your mind. Now, what's going to be on lots of people's minds is that the leadership of the country has been whittled down now to two people. The potential leader of the British government is either going to be Rishi Sunak or Elizabeth Truss. Which one of those would make the best pro-UK unionist? Who do you think has got the widest appeal? Who do you think can communicate to the people most effectively what Britain means? Or maybe can neither of them do it? What do you think? Please give us your thoughts on where you think the country is going to go, and send in your comments, folks. Now, let's have a look at one of two of your comments. Ian says that Truss will win, and that would be better, he says. Of course, what's going to happen is that the Conservative Party will send out the voting forms to its membership, and it will be the membership of the Conservatives who will choose the new leader of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. That's the way the system works at the moment. Paul says, greetings from the smoking embers of southeast England. We'll be talking about that in a minute, actually. One or two photographs to show you. Hi to Marcus, who says, evening everybody, and to Harry, evening everyone here. Absolutely, absolutely. That Preston journalist. Evening, Alistair. Great show. What are your thoughts on the death of humanity caused by a bit of sun? The end is nigh. Well, isn't it just, as a survivor of heat waves in my time, I am a survivor of the 1976 10-week heat wave, which I remember as simply sunny days, one after the other, playing football, running about, and having quite a good time of it when I was a small boy. And I'm personally used to the heat. I used to live, as I always say, in Libya for several years, where temperatures were regularly between 80 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit, so it never bothered me at all. I say I used to live in Libya. I mean, my parents also lived in Libya, which was just as well, because I was only 6 years old at the time. However, I did live there for 3 years, and I remember it very vividly, and it was a beautiful country. Beautiful, beautiful. Sand and sea and sun, all three combinations together. Can't beat it. Beside the beautiful Mediterranean. I always look back on those days and I felt so alive, especially when you went down to the beach and the Mediterranean is crashing against the rocks just a few feet away from you, and like, whoa, this is amazing. Amazing life. Incredible. Anyway, yes, talking about the heat. So there's been one or two photographs. Now, we've got, let's see, firstly, let's talk about climate alarmism, okay? In 1974, there was a Radio Times photograph, which we'll just put up there. There it is. November 1974, the Ice Age cometh. It's true, the weather is getting worse. Ice a mile thick has covered Britain 20 times in the Earth's recent past. It's due again. I read that. That says, ice a mile thick has covered Britain 20 times in the Earth's recent past. That's complete baloney. Who came up with that? Okay, that's 1974. And so they're telling us an ice age is coming, and the proof for that is that Britain's been covered by ice a mile thick 20 times recently. What rubbish they wrote, and still wrote. And so 2 years later, right, in the summer of 1976, and we've got a photograph of that as well. There's Lyme Regis in one of the days in 1976. Alan Henning says, it was tough, but a huge shout out to everyone who survived the 10-week heat wave of 1976. Yet some 46 odd years later, apparently we won't survive a 2-day one, and we're all going to die. The country has gone mad. And we just added our little 2 cents at the top there, saying these days the system can get some people afraid of anything. This is due to the power of social media. Isn't it? Isn't it just? Okay. And so really the system could just talk nonsense. Like that cover of the Radio Times that told us that Britain has been a mile deep in ice over 20 times in the recent past. That's like crazy. You know, some of the things that they say, you really have to wonder about it, because they say it's due to the burning of fossil fuels that we're getting these heat waves. Well, they're not even fossil fuels, right? Oil and coal are not fossils. If you believe the traditional story, right, they're the remains of dead plants and animals that somehow managed to get buried mainly in West Ayrshire in Scotland. Okay, as if all the animals back in whatever age all decided, let's all troop off to Tarbolton and Ayr and the Carrick and Cumnock Doon Valley, and let's all die there, so that in a million years' time they'll find our remains and they can dig it up as coal. That doesn't really make much sense to me. What makes even less sense is the idea that all these dead plants and animals are not only hundreds of feet below the ground, but they're also hundreds of feet below the water in the North Sea. How did the plants and animals get down there? Oh, 'cause there was the ice all melted. No, it's just a notion. It's just a theory, right? Until somebody comes up with a better theory, I'm keeping my mind open to all of that, quite frankly. I really am. I only got to thinking about that today. Like, what's the oil doing under the water? Under the ground, if indeed it's dead animals. That doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, lots of things don't make sense in the modern world. Looking back at the weather maps, okay, let's have some look at the weather maps. And this is how I remember the weather maps when I had a television. But I have to say I have not had a television for about 25 years. But I remember it used to be like that on the left, right? Old school weather forecast, happy and sunshiny. So you're looking at that and you're going, look at the sun's out. The sun's out everywhere. And the weather man or woman would be slapping on these sunny signs with great glee and abandon, and would be so happy to tell you that tomorrow's going to be a great day. Now look at the weather forecast, okay? It's red. Everything is red, and red, of course, signifies danger. And it's new style weather forecast designed to look like fear and destruction. And somebody pointed that out to me today. It's designed to make Britain look like Mordor, which of course was the burnt, volcanic, desolate land of the evil Sauron in Lord of the Rings. Okay, so on your left you've got happy Britain, and on the right you've got Mordor, basically. And it gets worse than that, okay? You actually get weather maps where Britain looks black. Look at this one that somebody pointed out. Look at that, right? Look at the black. That's like your toast after you've frazzled it after half an hour in the grill. I mean, it's like that's gone from red to death, okay? It's gone from red danger to black death. And it's only 30 degrees centigrade. Now, I don't know what that is in English, but I guess it's quite hot in Fahrenheit. And then they go down to London where it's 40 degrees centigrade. Okay. And that's another thing that annoys me, right? This is a personal little thing about centigrade, right? What's the point of centigrade? Because it goes from 0 to 100, but you never use most of the numbers, right? Okay, so the centigrade people are so happy because they finally get to use the number 40. But what about the numbers 41 to 99? They never get to use them, except the number 100 when, apparently, is that when water boils or something like that? So it's redundant. Most of the numbers in the centigrade scale are utterly redundant, okay? Whereas if you speak English, which means you understand Fahrenheit, then you know that 80 is hot, 90 is very hot, and 100 is extremely hot. And that's all you need to know, and you can go through your entire life knowing that. And I had a big quarrel with the Met Office this week on Twitter, although they never responded to me, so it was mainly me just quarrelling at them. But I'm saying, look, you're putting out all these notices about how dangerous the weather is, but you're putting it out in centigrade that old people don't even understand. So if you're trying to advise old people against going out in the heat, why can't you at least speak English so that they understand what the temperatures are? So centigrade is just another scientific deception intended to remove us from our spiritual understanding of reality, that which we can see with our eyes and ears. And scientists have been doing this for a long time now, like coming up with theories and ideas which your brain does not compute because it does not correspond to reality. Anyway, enough of that. So going back, there's nothing new about these temperatures. Somebody put out this one from 1868, okay? That's actually a cutting from the Daily Telegraph in probably the early 20th century. And I don't know how well you can see that there, but down on the first row, July 22, 1868, it's 96.6 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? So that's over 100 years ago, and that's as hot as it is today, basically, or yesterday in London. And you also notice what they did, right? They took the 40 degrees, but where they measured it was literally at the side of Heathrow Airport. Now, at Heathrow Airport, there's scores, indeed hundreds, of planes landing every day, great powerful jet engines that are, interestingly enough, they're very hot, and they totally make the area around the tarmac and around Heathrow very hot. Okay, so you're going to get a very hot reading if you have your thermometer there. Do you know where you'd get an even hotter reading? You'd probably get about a 300 degrees centigrade reading if you held your thermometer directly behind one of the jet engines while it's firing. You know what I mean? So that's again deception, scientific deception. Why are they deceiving us like that? Who knows? Anyway, the bottom line is get out and enjoy the day. And Bob Moran put out this cartoon again, and he used to be the Daily Telegraph's cartoonist, and he's the best cartoonist working in Britain at the moment, but he was too true to life that the Telegraph had to get rid of him because he doesn't fall for all the stuff. And there's a little child wearing all the protective clothing, and the father's given the child a fire extinguisher just in case you spontaneously combust, he says. So that's probably where we are at the moment. Good, that's really all I've got to say about about the sunny weather other than just enjoy it, and let's hope it continues for as long as possible. And do not be concerned that in any way, shape or form this marks some big thing that we've all got to be concerned about. We should be concerned that we don't get enough sun often. That's the thing. Adam says, apparently Scotland needs independence to preserve Scotland's sun, all because England had the highest temperatures. That's true. The sun must be English, really, when you think about it, because it's been putting most of its hot side onto England. Hey, there's a good point that Paul says. Climate change will strengthen the Union as the south of England becomes overheated and certainly overcrowded. More English people will move to Scotland and outvote the SNP. Stuart says, when I was a lad it was so hot we used the fridge as an oven. Marcus says, biased media conditioning the public that red areas is bad and trying to make us scared once again. I don't trust them and never will. All they do is make me angry. Oh, I know what you mean. And people, everybody who watches this, of course, our programme is, switched on. We understand the way that, what is it they call it these days, the matrix, the way it works, and how it's often encouraging fear deliberately, either to control us or to move us in certain directions. And the climate thing there is just absolutely another one of these. Catherine says, hello everyone, your notification didn't come through, by which you mean the YouTube notification. Theoretically, if you follow us on YouTube, you click the subscribe button and then click the bell for notifications. But some people have been saying that doesn't register. You don't get a notification. I don't know why that is. We're not the only organisation to note sometimes that it doesn't get sent out. The notification doesn't get sent out. Adam says, took him a while to eventually find this. Good, I'm glad you found it. What exactly do you mean by that, Adam? I hope you don't mean it took you a while to find the programme. We wouldn't like to think that we're not easily available. Any thoughts on the Rishi Sunak versus Liz Truss? To be frank with you, we're not sure if either of these people truly understand that what the United Kingdom is, but what we're going to ensure is that whoever becomes the Prime Minister will continue to receive good material from us, whether that's our magazines or our written publications or whatever, to try to help them or to try to help the people who surround them to understand. And we do that with all the leaders of the main pro-UK political parties, because the last thing that we want to do is simply to criticise, because criticism is useless. You've got to try to advise, to help, even if you might not be politically supportive of that particular type of politics. We're all about keeping the United Kingdom together, and we know that many people don't fully understand how best to articulate that, so we can help them. And we're all about trying to encourage them. So the last thing that we want to do is to criticise them in some way. So here's some points that we found on the internet yesterday, which will really help the next leader of the United Kingdom, whether that's Rishi Sunak or whether it's Liz Truss. And it's from an article. Okay, so here is this article, which was published on the Critic website, and it's a very good article and it's well worth reading, and you'll find the link to it in the thread. It's called How to Nix the Nats. Governments should stop indulging the SNP, and it's written by a chap there called John Stanley, 16th of July 2022. And he makes some very good points in this. Now, he talks a little bit about the Scottish Conservatives and his particular view of them. We're not going to comment on that as such, but rather we're going to look at the actual valuable suggestions that he has given to the next PM. And he advises that the next PM should stop talking about a referendum. Give the SNP essentially a red card. Ignore SNP calls for a referendum. And I like this bit. He goes, stop giving them oxygen. Direct the First Minister to her local MP if she wants to raise a matter which is reserved to Westminster. I really like that idea. Like, sorry, we can't help you. Please contact your local MP if you've got an issue regarding the Constitution. That's actually the way that it should be. That's the way that it should be. Stop indulging Sturgeon. Now, he says, transfer Barnett formula money, which is over $15 billion a year, to the Scotland office so that they directly fund areas in need. Okay? Take back control of it. Create fund holding where Scottish councils are given cash directly for projects according to their level of need. That's how it used to be. That's really good advice. Give it to the councils and the councils will spend it, rather than giving it to Holyrood, who will then withhold it for favours. And here's another thing that people are always talking about. He goes, draft legislation which is similar to the American Logan and Hatch Act, which means ban any elected official engaging in parallel diplomacy with foreign powers. He says, we saw from Brexit how insidious and outrageous such behaviour has become. Only the British government should meet with foreign officials, unless agreed otherwise, of course. Nothing wrong necessarily, I suppose, with joint diplomatic efforts, but this parallel diplomacy which the SNP is engaging in, pretending to be as if it's already separate from the rest of the United Kingdom, is wrong. He says here, fire the civil servants who engage in planning legislation out with the Scotland Act, by which is meant, of course, is those politicians who, those civil servants who are promoting and researching and publishing pro-independence material while they're still working for the British civil service. That shouldn't be allowed. So the first thing to do is to prohibit that. And if they continue to do that, then obviously fire them. As he says, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs isn't devolved. Why should any of the civil service be? And especially, this is a good one, commit now to a national audit of everything the Scottish administration does. That means unconditional open access to all their documentation. Criminalise the redaction of reports by devolved administrations. This is what devolution means. And also ban the funding of third sector groups and charities by devolved government, because what happens with that is that these devolved administrations will give lots of money to their particular favoured non-governmental organisations. He says, the only other country with a politically fuelled third sector where funding is subject to political approval is the Bunyad system of Iran. As he points out here, it inflates the nationalist payroll, building an army of activists ready for any future political action. Starve this fever now. All good points here, all good points. And he says we must terminate the regionalisation of the BBC and rotate its staff throughout the UK. That's so that they understand properly what's happening in each part of the United Kingdom. The BBC must be overtly unionist because it is overtly British. Balkanisation of licensed media is lunacy. This will save money and be much more inclusive. Very good points, Mr. John Stanley. Very good points. And that's the sort of thing. These are the sort of people who need to be advising the next Prime Minister of Great Britain. As he concludes, take the SNP head on. Give us our country back. We are the only nation to vote to remain in the UK when offered a choice. Respect us. Well, of course, Northern Ireland also voted to stay in the UK back in the 1970s, but I take your point, sir. Very good, very good. That's an excellent article, so you'll find that link in our thread there, How to Nix the Nats, in the Critic magazine. Good. Now, today is the 20th of July, and it was 20th of July in 2014 that it was only a few days before the opening of the Commonwealth Games in 2014. 2014 here in Glasgow. And of course that was the referendum year, and there was a concern among many people that Alex Salmond and the SNP was going to use the Commonwealth Games and ride on the back of any success that it had here in Glasgow in order to promote separatism. And we had been aware of that danger for a long while. I have to say though, at the end of the day, he was singularly unable to actually do that. And a lot of his inability to capitalise upon the Commonwealth Games was because they were intrinsically British. Okay? As many of us know, it was the British Commonwealth, or what we like to call now British wealth, that we have in common. And there was plenty of times during that Commonwealth Games when those British elements were highlighted, not least of which during the opening ceremony when there was the red arrows, when the Queen was there, and when, for example, almost 1/3 of the countries that were part of the Games actually flew the Union Jack as part of their particular flag as well. And I remember watching the opening ceremony on social media, and some of the Scottish nationalists were going mental about how many Union Jacks there were whenever the countries would come out, and they'd be carrying like Australia, New Zealand, and all the other British overseas territories and so on, and they've all got the Union Jack up in the corner of their flag, and the Nats were so annoyed about that. But so it came across really that the Commonwealth Games were very much a British affair, and we at A Force for Good did our best to emphasise that. And we wrote an article at the time called The British Wealth That We Have in Common, looking forward to the Commonwealth Games, and you'll find that link also in the threads on our social media. But something that we did on this day is we welcomed the Queen's Baton relay. Now, the Queen had put a message inside the Commonwealth Baton back in October 2013, and it had gone around all the 71 countries that were part of the Commonwealth Games, and it eventually arrived in Glasgow just 2 or 3 days before the opening ceremony. And so what we did at A Force for Good is we organised a welcome party, as it were, and there's about 40 of us, and we've got quite a nice picture up there of our flags. So that was flags of all the home nations, and it was flags of all the British overseas territories as well. And the ones that are immediately seen there, the red one, that's Bermuda. The one at the top is the Cayman Islands, and the one there towards the right of the photograph, that's the Falkland Islands. So we have other pictures, but we don't have them to show to you tonight. But that was really quite a good scene setting that we did, and that was on this day, on the 20th of July in 2014. Again, stamping Britishness upon the event. Okay, making people understand, educating people about what the Commonwealth was. And at the end of the day, it was an extremely successful Commonwealth Games. And for some reason as well, the sun shone for the 2 weeks straight. The 2 weeks straight, it was beautiful, hot, sunny weather. And there was no climate alarmism back in 2014. So people were getting out and they were enjoying the sunny weather that was in Glasgow for those 2 weeks. So it was a great 2 weeks, and it helped to emphasise the good things about the Union and the good things about Britain and the good things about the Commonwealth. And I remember it as very fondly. It was a very good event. And that was today. Now, the Commonwealth Games are coming up again this year. They're every 4 years. And this year, the Commonwealth Games will be held in the great British city of Birmingham. Okay, and that'll be very soon, actually. Next Friday they begin on the next Thursday, on the 28th of July, and they go through to the 8th of August. That's the British Commonwealth Games in Birmingham this year. Other on this day in British history, here's an interesting one, okay? We've all heard of Cinderella. We've all heard of Aladdin. We've all heard of Little Red Riding Hood. Oh, Grandma, what big teeth you've got. All the better to eat you, my dear. And you're like, okay, so I remember the nursery books and I've seen the pantomimes, but where did all that come from? Well, these fairy tales, as they are called, have of course a long genesis, mainly the ones that we know today from Europe and the rest of the world. And it wasn't until the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, that they were actually brought to the English-speaking world as commercial books for people to buy their children. And it was on this day that the novelist and book editor Andrew Lang passed away. And he and his wife Leonora are almost totally responsible for bringing fairy tales to the English-speaking world. Now, we've got a picture, firstly, of Andrew Lang there. Now, he was born on the 31st of March 1844 in Selkirk, and he died, as I say, on this day 110 years ago exactly, in 1912 in Banchory. Bonnie Banchory, the pride of all the Dee. Whenever I think of Banchory, I think of you and me, as the Alexander Brothers used to sing. And he's the one, along with his wife Leonora, who are primarily responsible for popularising fairy tales in the English language. Okay, that's probably something that you didn't know or ever actually think about before. And it was because he published the Lang's Book of Fairy Tales, which are 25 books of fictional tales for children between 1889 and 1913, which feature 798 stories. And the best known are the 12 collections of fairy tales. And I say Andrew Lang, but he edited the books, okay? He put the final flair upon them. But from what some people believe, the lion's share of the work was done by his wife Leonora, and we've got a picture of her there. That's Leonora Lang, and she had a team of translators. And in the preface to the Lilac Fairy Book of 1910, he states, quote, "The fairy books have been almost wholly the work of Mrs. Lang, who has translated and adapted them from the French, German, Portuguese, Italian, Spanish, Catalan, and other languages." And she passed away in 1933. After her husband Andrew died, she moved to Kensington, where she passed away in 1933. There you go, the couple, Andrew and Leonora, who are responsible for introducing fairy tales commercially and popularising them in the English language to the English-speaking world. Amazing, and he died on this day in 1912. British history is endlessly fascinating. Kiyoshi says, loving your Bay City Rollers shirt. Well, the Bay City Rollers, as I remember them growing up in the early 1970s, were a great kind of summertime band. In fact, I think they had a summertime song. Bay City Rollers, there was a summertime. One of their songs had the word summertime in it, I'm pretty sure. Paul says, those were excellent suggestions. Put them in the next issue of Union Heart. We'll certainly do what we can to publicise those sorts of suggestions, Paul, because politicians need it. Sometimes people think, oh, politicians, they know everything, they're clever, they're on the telly. Fact is, they don't. They don't actually know very much at all. And they need us to help them. And in that regard, they need us to support them. I've read something. I was doing a bit of filing around the office, and I came across this email which I'd received back in 2011. That was even before A Force for Good was formed, and it was from somebody called David. And he said these few words, which are quite deep, actually. I'm going to read them. He goes, people always get the kind of government they deserve. The type of government that people get is a product of the people's thoughts. The more we criticise our politicians, the more it scrambles the politicians' minds. the harder it is for them to make good decisions, and the worse our government becomes. Criticising is a form of negative prayer or cursing. Criticising is the devil's prayer. The more people complain and criticise the governments, the crazier you will make the politicians and the worse conditions will get. That same principle applies to anyone in any situation, from husbands, wives and families, to business environments, to church groups, to the political scene. Criticising and complaining about government leaders and authority is a sin. It erodes and degrades everything. Only when people become honest and intelligent and learn that they must pray for and bless their politicians, only then will they get good government. Very deep words, that. Very deep words. And I remember reading that, and obviously I printed it out and I filed it, and I discovered it just the other day, and it spoke to me. It spoke to me clearly, and we always try to live that life, try to avoid criticising if we can help in some way, if we can advise, because criticism, as he says, it's like negative prayer, and it just scrambles people's minds. So the politicians need to know that people support them or at least want the best for them. Even politicians that we disagree with, try to get them to maybe see other ways of looking at things, but always try to be constructive rather than destructive, creative rather than just simply critical. So basically we began the program asking what your thoughts were on Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss to be the leaders, and the comments have been fairly unimpressed with either, from as far as I can see that it seems to have gone down like a lead balloon, that people are not excited about either of Rishi Sunak or Elizabeth Truss, and that's perhaps to be expected. Stuart preferred Penny, but alas, that's not going to be the case. But Ian believes that Truss will win, and that's better for us. Why do you think Truss is going to be better for us, Ian, as opposed to Rishi Sunak? What is it about her that you think is superior as far as our needs are concerned to Rishi? Emma points something out there, says Rishi is a communist and Truss is a Lib Dem. Rishi wants a credit system. Well, I see what you mean by communist, yes, because the Chinese social credit system is a communist imposition in China, and some people believe that Rishi Sunak wants to bring in something very similar here in the United Kingdom, and especially as far as digital money is concerned as well, which would be a real problem, actually, ultimately, because I was just thinking about that today. Many of us, many people out there who live perhaps below the normal income line, totally depend upon cash, totally depend upon the cash economy in order simply to make ends meet. And if these people, if you get rid of cash, then you're going to have a large number of people at a certain level of society who are going to be struggling all the time. Because, like it or lump it, the cash economy is a necessity for many people today. And when I say the cash economy, I mean, the money that that's not necessarily declared is just necessary for some people out there to live in that situation. But so you take away cash from them, you take away their inability to use cash, and there'll be trouble. How are they going to make it through the day? So lots of big problems with moving towards only digital. I'm not personally completely opposed to digital banking at all, but too much of that and 100% of that, then that is absolute totalitarian control. I agree with you, Emma. Alan says, well, who would win a general election? That's what it's all about, isn't it? Truss or Sunak? Sunak does look like a PM. Truss is a bit cardboard. It's a hard choice. Truss perhaps more loyal, but would the wider public take to her? Stuart wonders, why don't the media mention the boat people in Leith, by which is meant, apparently they've put a lot of Ukrainian refugees in a big boat in Leith docks, which is remarkable when you think about it, but that's what they've apparently done. But the media is fairly quiet about that, perhaps because the media is very much for covering in many ways for Sturgeon. It's sad to say. We are experiencing some technological differences, as they say this evening. And so much for Sturgeon taking in a refugee. Yeah, that was all just talk. Although apparently Penny Mordaunt took in a refugee, I was hearing. Although she didn't make much of a fuss about it. In other words, she didn't tell people until after the fact, which was interesting. Yeah. So, I'm going to play a little video here, and it's got to do it. It's the British legend, okay, the British legend man, and he just needs a constant shout out, because he's on our TikTok, and his video just keeps going up every day. Every day it gets scores and hundreds of new views. So let's just play him again.
So what's your statement?
What's my statement about what?
Coming with a union flag to an independent march.
I'm protesting against the SNP.
Okay.
How they've ruined this country.
But this isn't an SNP march, sir.
It is.
This is a march for independence, which covers all sorts of parties.
Same thing.
No, it's not.
It is.
So you've made a mistake there already.
Oh, have I? Good.
Yeah.
Well, you put me right, haven't you?
Well, there you go then.
Good.
Yes, it's not an SNP march at all.
Oh, it's not.
No. You
Just
don't want SNP.
No.
That's a bit
because they've
strange.
ruined this country.
The SNP on their own.
Yes, on their own.
Okay.
With the help of people like yourselves.
Well, I'm not in the SNP, so how did that help?
You don't take your free prescriptions then?
Sorry?
You don't take your free prescriptions?
Of course I do.
You don't agree with...
You don't take the money coming up from England then, do you?
Okay, folks, it's been a good show. Sorry for all that technological difference that happened. Our technological difficulties. Sorry for that. Must be the weather. Must be climate change. But we'll be back next week on Wednesday the 27th. And until then, folks, thank you for watching. It just remains for me to say God bless the United Kingdom and God save the Queen. See you next week.